A wise man once said, that wise man might have been my buddy Stetson sitting right next to me at the game on Tuesday, that you can't win games if you don't score any runs. And well, that is kind of what happened to the Orioles on Tuesday. They were blanked by Cole Ragans and the Royals, and despite some dominance from Corbin Burnes, the Orioles lose game one, 1-0, and now head into Wednesday on the brink of elimination. I'll break down everything you need to know from the O's loss and tell you why they are still in this heading into game two. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, October 1st, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap game one of the wild card series between the Orioles and the Royals. And it was a tightly contested pitcher's duel, as we thought, but it did not go the Orioles' way. A 1-0 loss for the O's as they were blanked. The Royals take a 1-0 series lead, and the Royals can clinch this series and knock the O's out if they win again on Wednesday. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles loss, including really the reason why the O's went and got Corbin Burnes. He gives them 8 strong innings. We'll talk about the inability for the offense to put anything across against Cole Ragans. We'll talk a little bit about the moves that were made by the O's, both the bullpen and the pinch hitting, and why a lot of this was just the Orioles bats not getting it done when they needed to. Then we'll chat a bit about the Orioles postseason, or at least wild card roster, which was released, and how that played into what Hyde and the Orioles did on Tuesday. And finally, we'll get you ready for game 2 on Wednesday. Zach Eflin versus Seth Lugo, Orioles season on the line. Everything you need to know for that one is coming up next on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. And that's at PrizePicks. Run your game. So it was an Orioles loss. Royals 1, O's nothing. The final score from game 1 of this best of 3 wild card series. And the O's, again, they're on the brink of elimination, 1 loss away from it all being over here in 2024. But on the flip side, with this short wildcard series, just 2 wins away from moving on to the ALDS. So I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 1-0 loss to the Royals in game 1 of the wildcard series. And the first thing you need to know is Corbin Burnes was awesome in his Orioles playoff debut. This is, besides the fact that he gave him 30 fantastic starts this year and a sub-3 ERA, this is why the Orioles made that big trade, swung that big deal in the offseason, sending a draft pick along with DL Hall and Joey Ortiz, multiple players that the O's thought would be big parts of their future, sending those guys to Milwaukee to get an ace like Corbin Burnes, who they knew there was a chance he was only going to be around for 1 year. And he has certainly given the O's everything he had and more in this year so far. Burnes goes 8+ innings in this one. His longest start as an Oriole. He saves for the postseason. Just 1 run allowed on 5 hits, 3 strikeouts, and a walk on only 84 pitches. Now, it wasn't his most elite start. It wasn't his most dominant start. That was certainly the case. Only 3 strikeouts, only 6 swings and misses. And the Royals did have 10 hard hit balls against him. But what Burnes did was play exactly to this Kansas City Royals offense. I had talked about it on Monday's episode, how the Royals had by far the worst offense in baseball throughout the month of September. They were putrid, especially since losing Vinny Pasquantino. Now, Vinny was back in the lineup as the DH on Tuesday, and we'll talk about that a bit. But he just said, here's my cutter, my best pitch, the pitch I have overhauled a bit to get it back where it needs to be in these final month or 2 months or so. Try and hit it. And he threw strike after strike with that cutter. He threw it 58% of the time on Tuesday night. 73% of his cutters were inside the strike zone. He just said, Royals, I think you might know what's coming. Here it is. Try and hit it. One of the worst offensive teams in baseball right now. And guess what? They really didn't hit it. over 8+ innings, Burnes just kept throwing cutters. He got a whole bunch of early outs. He was able to be pitch efficient. That allowed him to get deep into these games. I mean, he pitched into the ninth. How about that? Really, nobody's doing that these days, especially in the postseason when everything's on the line. And he only threw 84 pitches. I mean, we'll get to him coming out of the game. It was kind of the place for that after he gives up the leadoff single in the ninth, but just fantastic stuff. He dared a struggling Royals offense to beat his cutter in the zone, and they didn't, so he just kept going to it. And again, he can be more dominant. He can get more swing and miss. He did throw some really good sweepers, which got him out of a couple of jams in this game. But here's the thing. I hope we see more Corbin Burnes. I hope the O's come back and we see Burnes in game 2 and maybe game 5 of the ALDS and beyond. But for Corbin Burnes, if it is the unfortunate scenario, and that is the final time we see him in an Oriole uniform, what a way to go out. I mean, he gives you everything, and more in his postseason start. Unfortunately, the O's could not help him out on the other end. But the second thing you need to know from this one is that the Royals, they got only one run. Unfortunately for the O's, that was all Kansas City needed in this game. Now, if you're going to do one blemish on Corbin Burnes in this game, it is that you really can't be, especially with a lineup that's struggling this much, you really cannot be walking the number 9 hitter to lead off an inning. I love Maikel Garcia. I think he's going to be the truth one day. He really did not finish the season strong at all. That's why he went from the 2-hole for a lot of the year for the Royals to their number 9 batter who wasn't even playing every day. But Burnes on a 3-2 cutter, a pitch that was close to the inside corner and could have been called a strike, didn't get the call. He walks Garcia to lead off the 6th in a 0-0 game. And the issue with that is not just a leadoff walk to the number 9 man, which is always bad because then you got to eventually face Witt and Pasquantino and Perez with runners on. But Garcia is one of those 2 Royals, him and Bobby Witt, in the starting lineup, who can become an automatic stolen base against anyone. When you add in the fact that it is Corbin Burnes, and the one flaw in his game is he gave up more stolen bases than any starting pitcher in baseball this year, the combination was Garcia's leadoff walk was going to turn into a double. And that's exactly what happened. He stole second. He got himself there. Then after a couple of outs, he gets to third with 2 down. Burnes did a fantastic job of limiting it, not letting him score. And it came down to a really, really interesting decision in that 6th inning for Baltimore. And it basically was, do you pitch to Maikel Garcia? I misspoke. It was a 1-out walk to Garcia, not a leadoff walk, but still, you don't want to walk the 9-man. He gets a ground out to Massey. So Garcia's at third with 2 down. You've got Bobby Witt Jr., probably second in the American League MVP at the plate. And you've got Vinny Pasquantino, another very talented hitter, on deck. The O's had a big decision to make, and there's multiple things to factor in. Burnes has the matchup advantage against Witt because he is a righty. Pasquantino on deck is a lefty. Both guys hit the ball really, really well, but Witt, of course, having this MVP season. And although Pasquantino had been amazing this year, Vinny Pasquantino had missed the last month with a broken thumb. He was just activated off the injured list and put on the Royals roster on Tuesday, and he was DHing. He's their usual first baseman. He was DHing because he's still not fully 100%. He's not ready to play the field, but can at least swing the bat, and that's why he was in there. Now, the lefty might have a little bit of a better shot than the righty against Corbin Burnes. And also, when you look at how the game had gone, Vinny Pasquantino did fly out to center and then strike out, but of those 2 guys in their 4 at-bats before the 6th inning, Pasquantino had the best swing against Burnes. Burnes got Bobby Witt to hit infield pop-ups for 2 outs in his first 2 times up there. And you got to think he was feeling confident against Bobby Witt Jr. And Brandon Hyde said after the game, he said he asked Corbin Burnes, who do you want to go after, Witt or Pasquantino? Burnes said Witt. And this is your ace. This is the guy you brought in to lead this staff. This is your veteran leader. I am totally fine deferring to Corbin Burnes in that spot. You don't want to do it all the time, but he's the guy who got you there, just dealing in this game to keep it 0-0. He had gotten Witt twice already. He wanted to go after him. And it's not like Witt hit a bomb. It's not like Witt drove one over the wall. It's not like Witt laced one into the gap. He hit a ground ball that wasn't even hard hit that just snuck through the left side for an RBI single. And it was unfortunate and to put the Royals up 1-0. But the other thing is, if you walk Witt, it's going to be 1st and 3rd and 2 outs. And on the very first pitch, he's going to steal second. And I know the Orioles did actually catch him stealing to end that inning, But in a first and third scenario with 2 outs and a tie game, you're not throwing through there. You are allowing probably Bobby Witt to steal second base. Then with Pasquantino up, if he just flicks one into the outfield somewhere, all of a sudden it's 2-0 instead of 1-0. So that's something you got to take into account as well. Again, it was one of the bigger decisions of the game. Maybe not the biggest decision, but one of the bigger decisions of the game. And if Hyde and Burnes are both on board with that decision, I'm on board with that as well. It's 6-1, half dozen the other. I mean, Bobby Witt is a better hitter than Pasquantino, no doubt about it. But in that spot, that is where they went. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. They got out of the inning. And again, that's the only run they allowed. So yes, you're picking apart this decision here. But if you're looking at the bigger picture, you should not be in a spot where the one run your starter gives up over 8 innings feels like the thing that cost you the game, because it's not. Usually when you give up one run in a playoff baseball game, you're going to win that game, because giving up one run is an incredible pitching performance. And that's what it was by Burnes and the couple of relievers on Tuesday. It was just that one little spot, and the O's got beat by an elite hitter there. And I talked about it on the Monday episode. I said, Bobby Witt's going to beat you. He's too good of a hitter to not beat you. You just have to make sure the other Royals hitters don't beat you. And that's exactly what happened. The Royals get one run on a Bobby Witt RBI single. It went to plan perfectly for the O's pitching wise. Unfortunately, that was not enough, because the third thing you need to know from this loss is the Orioles offense just did not do anything. 5 hits and 2 walks on the day, 3 singles and 2 doubles for the O's. And that was really it. I would say the Orioles had 3 chances to score in this game. I would call it 3. You could argue maybe more, maybe less. I would call it 3. The first one was the third inning. Cedric Mullins hits that leadoff double off the scoreboard in right field. Big day for Mullins, by the way, on his birthday. Really showed out in this one. Kind of the only Orioles hitter that did. Then they go strikeout, ground out, and then Jordan Westburg hits that screamer to left field, which was a home run in 28 of 30 ballparks. Unfortunately, we're in this ballpark, and it's helped the Orioles more than it's hurt probably over the last few years, but took away a couple of runs from the O's there. Melendez runs it down to end the inning. Then you have the 5th inning. You get the Arias double where Melendez just forgets how to play the field, I think, in left field. Like, I know it's tough to watch that O's loss, but it was a little funny watching Melendez try to field that ball that turned into that 1-out Arias double in the 5th. Then Mullins singles. Arias didn't get a great read, but it also was kind of a floater into the outfield. I'm not upset with Arias just kind of holding up on that ball. So it makes it 1st and 3rd with 1 out. And again, the O's can't come through. McCann and Gunnar both strike out, and they leave the runners out there. And then the last one was the 8th inning. The first 2 batters go down, but then Gunnar walks, Westburg singles, and you get your guy. You get Anthony Santander to the plate. You get the pitching change. Royals go to their closer, Lucas Erceg, in the 8th inning. I talked about how good he has been this year for Kansas City. And he gets the ground out from Santander and gets out of the jam. And really, those were the 3 spots. And the O's just did not come through. It kind of looked like the offense that really struggled at times in September, despite the fact that the O's over the last 10 days of the season or so really felt like they found their offense again. And it wasn't the worst approach in the world. The Orioles weren't flailing at balls out of the strike zone. They weren't chasing everything in the dirt up high. I mean, Cole Ragans is great, and we'll get to that. He's going to get you to chase. But the swing decisions really weren't bad. The Orioles they mostly swung at strikes. They just did not make any hard contact. Only 5 hard hit balls in the entire game. That is not a winning formula. And sometimes you can do enough there to dink and dunk. And when you only give up 1 run, sometimes you can scratch across 2 with 5 hard hit balls and find a way to win a baseball game. The Orioles just weren't able to do that. And I think this game really kind of showed from the Orioles end, something I've been talking about for months now, how important the home run ball is offensively in the postseason. When you're losing 1-0 in a game where your offense isn't really getting much going, but you're one of the best home run hitting teams in baseball, you always feel in it because you're just like, any of our 9 guys can run into one, tie this game, and completely flip it on its head. It's a brand new ball game. And they just didn't run into one. Again, they didn't really square up the baseball. They didn't hit the ball. I mean, they hit the ball in the air. They just didn't square it up. They didn't drive the ball towards the gaps. It wasn't even really close at any time to feeling like the ball was going to leave the yard, except for that Jordan Westburg screamer in the 3rd inning. So it's unfortunate because 1 ball out of the ballpark could completely change this game. And that's why home runs are so important in the postseason. Just didn't come for the O's. And you had to get it going. I mean, and the stadium, it was kind of dead because even though the O's were always in the game, right? It was 0-0 for 5 innings, then it was 1-0 for the final 4 innings. You're always one swing away from tying it up, even if there's nobody on base. But I feel like in a playoff game like that, it's a little bit of a weird scenario because it's during the day. It's not fully sold out because of the weird scenarios with the rain and not knowing the first pitch time until right before the game, or right 2 days before the game. You just kind of have to get that early run and let the fans relax a little bit, feel like they can cheer, feel like, okay, we know we can score once, now we can do it even more. And the crowd had its moments, certainly, and got into it, but you couldn't even explode once in this game. And that's what the Orioles offense just did not do. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from this O's loss in game 1 of the wild card series is that you do have to give a lot of credit to Cole Ragans, because it's not like the Orioles went out there and got shut out by some bum. They got shut out by one of the best pitchers in the American League, a guy in Cole Ragans who has shut out plenty of teams this year as well, and once again pitched very, very well. 6 scoreless innings for Ragans, 8 strikeouts, no walks, 4 hits allowed. Again, just 3 hard hit balls against him. Now, he came out of the game at only 80 pitches. I was in the stadium going, what in the world are the Royals doing? Well, it did come out he had some sort of calf cramp or something where Matt Quatraro and the Royals did pull him before the 7th inning. He would have continued to cruise along there at just 80 pitches. But he just kind of went out there and dominated. And it wasn't like he had gigantic swing and miss. I mean, Ragans did get 15 whiffs, but he got at least 2 whiffs on all 5 of his pitches. The impressive thing was, and this was very similar to how good Corbin Burnes was on the other side, he had a different plan for every Orioles hitter, and he seemed to attack them all perfectly. Every time he went up there, he threw strikes, he threw the ball in the corner, he threw quality pitches, he attacked guys, he was efficient, he went after the O's hitters. This was a true ace-off. I mean, a battle of 2 pitchers on their game in this one, and you do have to give credit to Ragans. He executed perfectly against the O's, and the couple of times that they had those chances, especially when they had first and third with 1 out in the 5th, he bared down and probably made his best pitches of the night, striking out McCann and Gunnar to get out of that, and was really just fantastic in this one. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 1-0 loss to the Royals in game 1 of the wild card series is that Brandon Hyde, I thought, really did push the right buttons in this one. I know there's probably a mafia of people in the comments right now and a mafia of people listening thinking that Brandon Hyde should be fired and he's the worst manager in baseball. Well, A, neither of those things are true. But B, this was solely just the Orioles offense not hitting. I mean, you want to think about everything you can try to do to win a game. You get 8+ innings of 1-run ball from Corbin Burnes. Check. Your bullpen comes in. They didn't have to do much, but Hyde pulls Burnes at that time in the 9th. He's about to see the hitters for the 4th time around in the lineup. Probably a good time to get him out there. He goes and Keegan Aiken and Sir Anthony Dominguez combined to put up a 0 in the 9th. That was good. He pushed the right bullpen buttons. Hyde went to his pinch hitters when he thought it was the best time to do so. He went to Emmanuel Rivera instead of James McCann in the 8th. Rivera didn't come through, but who's hotter than Emmanuel Rivera right now after the weekend he had in Minnesota? So you give him a chance as a better hitter than James McCann. You go to Ryan O'Hearn as your guy in the 9th inning to bat for Mountcastle against the righty. He draws that leadoff walk in the 9th, the spot where you think it could start the rally. Really, the only decision I probably didn't agree with wholeheartedly with Hyde was to use Heston Kjerstad where he did. Runner on first, 2 outs, down 1-0, bottom 9. Ramon Arias coming up against the righty Urseg, and he goes to Heston Kjerstad. Totally get the reasoning there. Like, Arias has been a great hitter, but the power is really not there, especially at Camden Yards with the big wall. It's just much less likely to gap one, to hit a walk-off homer, to hit a game-tying double. Kjerstad as the lefty there against the righty with the pop is kind of more likely to tie the game or win the game in that at-bat, and that's what you're trying to do. I just think that's a tough spot for Kjerstad for his first ever playoff at-bat. Remember, he was on the postseason roster last year, but did not appear in a game in that ALDS against the Rangers. So just kind of a tough spot for Kjerstad, and he struck out and did not come through. I probably would have just left Arias in to hit there. It's not like I would have gone to Holiday instead. That also would have been a tough spot for his first postseason at-bat. I probably would have just kind of left Arias in there to hit. You let Mullins hit, and then if you get to the 9 spot, where it was the pitcher spot, you either go to Kjerstad or Holiday there. Of course, that would still be a tough spot for their first playoff at bat, but you would think if you got all the way there, the Orioles would have at least tied the game at that point, and the pressure's not on as much. Hey, if you don't get a hit, we've still done our job. We're still going to extra innings. That was kind of about it. Hyde tried to press the buttons. He did. Orioles just didn't hit. I mean, you got your best lineup in there. maybe Sans, James, and McCann. Just didn't hit. You get 0 runs. I mean, you can all blame as much as you want of other things. When the offense gets 0 runs, you cannot win. And that is what happened in this game. But I do want to talk about a little bit of the roster and how it was used, because I did my roster prediction and I was off on a few players. I want to talk about why the Orioles went with the guys that they did on their wild card roster and break down kind of what their roles would be if this wild card series does continue beyond Wednesday. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money and sports action. With over 10 million active members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You must pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. I go on the PrizePicks app and it's so easy. The best part is you can make all your picks in 60 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. The app is so easy. You're done. Takes less than a minute. Then you just wait for hopefully the money to roll in. You can win even up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It is the best place to play daily fantasy sports. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers these weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like they've got Taco Tuesday. Yeah, that's pretty fun as well. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's at PrizePicks. Run your game. So the O's did not score, and when you do not score, you lose baseball games. That was what happened on Tuesday, a 1-0 defeat at the hands of the Kansas City Royals. And yeah, it doesn't feel amazing. Of the 8 previous wildcard series since since MLB went to this format in 2022, 7 of the 8 wildcard winners were teams that won that first game. So it's been done before, but you do put yourself behind the 8 ball. Did want to talk a little bit about the Orioles wildcard roster before we get into what needs to happen for the O's on Wednesday to keep their season alive. Really, the big decision we saw besides the roster on Tuesday was James McCann getting the start behind the dish. Now, it was something I had talked about on Monday's series preview episode, and Vivek in the comments actually made a good point about McCann potentially starting with the left-hander in Ragans being on the mound. McCann hitting really better than Adley and honestly hitting pretty well. I've been an above-average hitter down the stretch, and the fact that he, in terms of controlling the running game, has been better than Adley Rutschman, and McCann caught Corbin Burnes' final 3 regular season starts. Seemed like they were maybe setting him up to catch here in this game 1 as well. McCann caught a great game. He threw out Bobby Witt stealing, but he also came to the plate in 2 big spots in this game and did not come through. And that was the risk of starting James McCann, even though you hit him in the 9 hole and you know that, hey, if it's a really big spot late in the game, we are still able to pinch hit for him, and that is what they did. They brought in Emmanuel Rivera in the 8th inning, but you run the risk, and this is why I kind of advocated for starting Austin Slater or even Emmanuel Rivera. I was kind of on the Slater train in this game, and they instead went with James McCann, and I get it for the defensive purposes, but his first AB after the Mullins leadoff double was nobody out, runner on second in the 3rd, and he struck out. He was not able to get the runner over. And the next one was even bigger. He comes up 1st and 3rd after the Mullins double and after the Arias double and the Mullins single. He comes up 1st and 3rd, 1 out in the 5th inning, and that is the big spot. Now you're thinking, okay, James, just don't ground into a double play. At least get Gunnar to the plate. He struck out on 3 pitches. You want him to make something happen. You want him to at least scratch across that run. And again, Gunnar also struck out and did not come up in that big spot, but that is the risk that you run. 2 huge spots for James McCann, and he comes up empty. And they did, again, pinch hit Rivera for him in the 8th. I figured they would have someone hit for him. I didn't know if it was going to be Rivera or maybe pick Slater, but either way, I figured they'd have him sit in that 8th inning. And Brandon Hyde was going to be ready. They did have to burn the DH, but if they had to get to that point where that pitcher spot was up, the Orioles had pinch hitters waiting on the bench. They were certainly prepared if they had to burn the DH, which I think they were planning to do at some point if they were trailing in this game. Now, the other thing was Emmanuel Rivera was the guy who hit for McCann in that 8th inning. And I had predicted that he would not make the roster when I talked on Monday. Now, my reasoning for that was I thought the Orioles would maybe start Austin Slater against the lefty. They would DH Santander. And then when they pinch hit for Slater, I figured they want another good defensive outfielder on the roster to put in for him or put in for his pinch hitter late in the game instead of having to use Kjerstad or O'Hearn in the outfield of a close game. But instead, they go with Rivera. And I guess, if you're going to put him on the team, you're going to use him. And he becomes the pinch hitter for James McCann. Now, even though Rivera had a great weekend and has honestly been really, really good since coming over to the Orioles, he's a better hitter than James McCann. I think we can all agree with that. The difference in them is not gigantic in terms of what they bring at the plate. He came up against a lefty. That's why O'Hearn or Kjerstad or Holiday was not used in that spot. It was just, get a better right-handed hitter in there. But it's kind of Rivera versus Slater at this point is kind of 6-1, half dozen the other. Or I guess Rivera versus Slater versus McCann is just like you kind of throw your hands up and you're like, that's the spot you put yourself in by starting McCann. And I get it. I totally understand why they did it, but that's where you put yourself. And Rivera got his chance and he did not come through either. And the last one that was a bit surprising was Cade Povich making the roster. I figured that the Orioles would, even with Albert Suarez not being on the roster, I figured they'd go with Keegan Aiken as more of the long man, and they'd want to get another right-handed reliever in there and have Matt Bowman on the team. Instead, Colin Selby makes it over Matt Bowman, and they go with Cade Povich as kind of the long man. Now, it gives them 5 lefties versus 4 righties in this bullpen. The Royals aren't super lefty heavy, but they can mix and match pretty well because they have a deep bench. So they're not, I don't think, really righty heavy either. They're kind of split down the middle fairly well, but they go with Cade Povich. And to me, that tells me that, hey, if anything were to happen to Zach Eflin, or if anything maybe even happens to Dean Kramer, if they get to game 3, like they could go to Povich to be some sort of long relief arm, and he gets that spot over Matt Bowman to have an extra lefty in that pen. And again, I didn't predict that move, but a move I really don't mind having Cade Povich over Matt Bowman on this roster. Those are 2 guys who you don't even really plan to pitch, really. You're hoping to use your better arms and get through a series, but it's all hands on deck now. You're down 1-0. You're facing elimination. Anybody who can help you win on Wednesday is going to do so. And that's what we get to next to finish off the pod. Orioles and Royals game 2 on Wednesday. O's trying to keep their season alive. We will break down the pitching matchup. We'll break down how these guys have fared against the opposite teams earlier this year in starts. We'll talk about the bullpen usage and how the lineup could look different and all that good stuff coming up next to finish off the show. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And again, I said it last week, Ravens -2.5. Take the Ravens. Well, they multiplied that by 10. So this week, Ravens and Bengals. I'm not sure the Bengals have figured out how to play football yet. Why don't you take the Ravens? Here's the disclaimer. Don't take my betting advice, but I'll be taking the Ravens in that one. And you can do it all at FanDuel.com. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Gametime. If you're looking for tickets for Game 2 here on Wednesday, Gametime is the spot to be because Gametime now has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Those Gametime Picks, the curation makes it easy to save money on your Orioles tickets. You can get those playoff tickets right there at Gametime. And the all-in pricing feature, once you turn it on, there's no surprise fees. They've got views of your seat. They've got your lowest price guarantee. Gametime really has everything. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So for the Orioles, it is officially now or never in game 2 of this wild card series. Royals taking game 1, 1-0. That means it's a best of 3, and the O's are facing elimination in this one. And they will officially, as they didn't announce initially, but they did after the game on Tuesday, Zach Eflin will get the ball. The veteran right-hander will start game 2 for the O's with the season on the line. And that would have been an odd sentence to say back in spring training, because we would have been like, Zach Eflin is on the Orioles. But with how well he's pitched down the stretch, I feel pretty good about Zach Eflin being on the mound with the Orioles season on the line. Now, he is coming off his worst start with the O's. He was a little shaky at Yankee Stadium last week, but otherwise, he has been great. With the Orioles, 55 and a third innings over 9 starts, has a 2.60 ERA with a 21% K rate and a minuscule 5% walk rate. He did start a wild card series game last year for the Rays against the Rangers and was not great. 5 innings of 5-run ball, 9 hits, 3 Ks, 2 walks, and 2 homers as that Texas offense really heated up, and we knew what they did after that. But he's got postseason experience. He's got about 16 innings of playoff experience, not just that start last year, but in 2022 with the Phillies, he was actually a big high leverage part of that Phillies bullpen as they made their run into the 2022 World Series. Eflin was like the closer for a little bit of that. They kind of mix and match their 9th inning guys, but Eflin was a part of that. He was great out of the bullpen. And yeah, this will be a start, of course, and that's a little bit of a different task in the playoffs, but I am confident in Zach Eflin. Now, he has faced the Royals once this season. He faced them on the 4th of July when he was with the Rays. It didn't go great. 5 innings, 6 runs, 5 earned on 7 hits, 3 Ks and a walk, and 1 home run. But he got dinked and dunked to death in that start. 7 hard hit balls against them. The ones that were squared up came at the perfect times. It was like after an error or after a little dinky hit, somebody would hit a home run or somebody would put one in the gap, and the runs just kind of snowballed on him in that start. He threw strikes. He had some bad luck. He gave up big hits 1 or twice in big spots, but he's a different pitcher now. The Orioles have changed his pitch mix, but even back then against the Royals, he threw a whole lot of cutters, and guess what? The Royals didn't square them up, and he throws even more cutters now. And the best thing about all of this is if Eflin just takes pretty much the same attack plan as Corbin Burnes, which is throw a lot of strikes, throw your best pitches, challenge the Royals hitters to put the ball in play and make hard contact. That's what Eflin already does. He piles the ball in the strike zone. He hits the corners. He gets soft contact. There it is right there. If Eflin just does what he always does, takes the Corbin Burnes blueprint, he can have the kind of success that Burnes did on Tuesday. Now, on the flip side, it'll be Seth Lugo going for the Royals, and he has had a fantastic season as well. 33 starts. He's been a true innings eater for the Royals. 206 and 2/3 innings for the right-hander Seth Lugo, a 3.00 ERA, but a good ground ball pitcher. Not a lot of strikeouts, 22%, but he throws just like Eflin, a whole lot of strikes. He will not really walk you, just a 6% walk rate. The crazy thing about Seth Lugo, he throws 9 different pitches. Let me say it again. 9 different pitches that Seth Lugo throws. 4-seam fastball, sinker, curveball, slurve, slider, cutter, changeup, sweeper, splitter. And he throws them all in games. He will throw them all. Here's the crazy part of it. Now, there's a couple pitches, like I believe the sweeper and the splitter, that he's kind of gone away from a little bit as the season has gone on. He still used them a bit. There has not been any one pitch that he has used more than 20% of the time in the month of September. So in September, he's become even more of truly, when you talk about a pitcher with a kitchen sink approach, right? He's throwing everything at you but the kitchen sink. That is Seth Lugo to a T. In a nutshell, that is Seth Lugo. He will throw everything at you to try to get you out. And in September, he truly did that, and he was really good. 27 and 2/3 innings, 2.28 ERA, 26 Ks to 4 walks in the final month of the season. Now, I mentioned how Eflin got hit around by the Royals a little bit this year. The good news for the O's is Lugo also got hit around by the Orioles. Now, it was all the way back on April 21st in Kansas City, but the Orioles got to Seth Lugo. He went 5 1/3 innings in that one, allowing 4 runs on 9 hits. He had only 1 strikeout to 1 walk, 2 home runs. Colton Cowser and Jordan Westberg went back-to-back against him in the 3rd inning with 2 absolute bombs. The Orioles had 13 hard hit balls against Seth Lugo in those 5 1/3 innings. Barely any swings and misses. The O's put the ball in play, put it in play hard. That is what the O's need to do. And with the right-hander on the mound, you'll get Ryan O'Hearn back in there for the Orioles. It will be interesting to see what they do. I don't think they'll sit Ryan Mountcastle. I think they would have Mountcastle play first and just have O'Hearn DH, which means you're basically getting the same lineup, except McCann's out of there, Adley's catching, and O'Hearn is in the DH spot. That's probably what they're going to do. There's an off chance that maybe Heston Kjerstad could find his way in there or if I should say they want to sit Mountcastle, but more than likely you'll see everything but O'Hearn for McCann, and you will go from there and hope that that lineup can bring it together. Because the Orioles, they only used Aiken and Dominguez, and I mean, let's be honest, they kind of barely used them. Aiken threw 13 pitches, Dominguez threw 3, so both of those guys are available tomorrow. So the Orioles have not only Zach Eflin, who pitches deep into games, but also has his entire array of relievers if he needs to go to them. Now, theoretically, the Royals also have their whole bullpen, but Chris Buvich threw 20 pitches. Lucas Erceg threw 23 pitches to get the save. So while they may pitch, maybe not as incredibly available to do anything in Game 2 on Wednesday. So I'd say bullpen edge goes to the Orioles. Starting pitching, I'd call it a wash with Lugo versus Eflin. And I know the offense didn't look good, but remember, the Royals offense looked bad too. I'm still taking the talent and edge Orioles in the offense on Wednesday. It's pretty simple. They need to find a way to get some hits, put some runs across the board. It's not the greatest analysis in the world, but when you get shut out in a playoff game and now your backs are fully against the wall, you've got to execute. I've got some good comments here that just, hey, they put up the best 9, just didn't execute. Right there. Orioles, step 1 I mentioned is just win a freaking playoff game. Can we do that? Can we string some hits together and win I'm not going to go further on the language, but win a freaking playoff game? Can we do that? Then the next step is winning a series. Can we just get a playoff win at Camden Yards? Just get me to Thursday. Get me to Game 3, and let's see what happens. The Orioles are the better team in this series. The playoffs are a crapshoot. Best of 2 out of 3 series, anything can happen. Anybody can get cold for a little bit. The playoffs in Major League Baseball, they don't determine who the best team is. The regular season does. But the playoffs are also fun, and at some point, you got to get the W's in there. So the Orioles, please string together some hits, put it together, get this to Thursday, and we will go from there. But either way, I will have a live episode for you again on Wednesday night. Shortly after the game, I will not be in attendance for Wednesday's game, so probably a little sooner after the game ends, we will go live. Hopefully, we're talking about an O's win. I'll break it down, and I'll give you everything you know need to know for a deciding Game 3 on Thursday. There's also a chance that the O's lose. If that happens, I'm still going live to break down what went wrong if the Orioles season does in fact end on Wednesday. But hopefully it's not over yet, and the O's can extend it for at least one more day with a W. But either way, I'll be back with a live episode here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and join us back here on Wednesday evening. Until then, I am Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.